Good morning. I am Dr. Diana Bowen here at the University of the Virgin Islands, and I am so pleased to introduce our panel under the strand of sacred traditions this morning. And this panel is organized by Dr. Michael Barnett at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. And the panel is titled A 2020 Vision, Perspective, and Beyond on Various Aspects of the Rastafari Movement. So, for our first presentation today, we're going to hear from Dr. Charles Price at Temple University. So please help me welcome Dr. Charles Price to the podium. They want your mics.
They want your mics. All right, greetings. Greetings to everyone. Rasta love. Haile Selassie to all the Rasta people in the room. All right, so all right, you need the mic? Yes. All right, good. Okay, good. All right. So my original idea was to present to you some new findings that I have on the first Africa Core. But after discussion with Ras Michael, I decided to do something different, something that would perhaps be more interesting not only to the scholarly audience, but to the local audience as well. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Rastafari became a national security threat, but also how Rasta people moved from that status of national security threat to that of cultural exemplar, and then maybe leave you with a few thoughts about Rasta and the 21st century, okay? So I'm going to begin in 1959. In 1959, Reverend Claudius Henry proclaimed publicly that it was time for black Jamaicans to leave Jamaica for Africa. We're not going to debate here whether or not Reverend Henry was a Rasta. He was labeled a Rasta. He devoted himself to Emperor Selassie, and we'll leave there. We can have that discussion another time. Reverend Henry announced that a ship would arrive in fall 1959 to ferry his followers in particular to the African continent. He issued these blue cards that would serve as passports. As the departure time neared, hundreds of people flocked to his Rosalie Avenue address in Kingston. I say hundreds, and that's conservative because some would say thousands, but we certainly know that there were many hundreds who flocked to his Rosalie Avenue address in Kingston. These people sold their land, they sold their homes, they sold their material possessions, they sold everything that they couldn't take with them to Africa. Now, the colonial government expected utter chaos, and they expected violence. However, the ship never arrived, and Reverend Henry postponed the departure date to Africa to an unspecified future time. Now, upon this news, there was utter chaos and severe disappointment, but once it became clear that repatriation was not at hand and that many were destitute. However, to nearly everyone's surprise, there was no violence. Yes.
Don't forget that you've got to click here to follow.
Yeah. But to everyone's surprise, there was no violence. Now, this is of note because by this point in time, threat and violence were becoming synonymous with Rasta people for a number of reasons. One, partly because of the stepped-up organizing of Rasta people for repatriation to Africa, partly because of the violent attacks upon Rasta people around this time. So think, for instance, of the Coronation Market riot in 1959, partly because of the language that many, not all, but many Rasta people were using at that time, language that we could call symbolic violence language. I'll give you an example in a second. And partly because of things that were happening beyond Jamaica, but in various ways connecting with the development of Rastafari as a people. Now, recall also that in 1959, Fidel Castro led a guerrilla movement that overthrew Fulgencio Batista, his regime in Cuba. Now, also note that Cuba is less than 250 miles from Jamaica. So what else is happening? Superpower politics are gaining traction across the world, with non-aligned nations like Jamaica becoming pawns, both pawns and players, in an emergent world order that promised a coalition of these non-aligned nations, or what we sometimes in the past called the Third World. Now, this Third World, or non-aligned group of nations, imagine themselves as contesting the First World and the Second World orders. Now, Time magazine ran a series of unflattering stories on Jamaica during 1960, and these stories, I think, will exemplify for you what I mean by symbolic violence. So I'm quoting here from Time magazine 1960, quote, "An unnerving, if infrequent experience for white men in Jamaica this year is to be hailed on the streets of Kingston by a band of bearded Negroes yelling the slogan, 'Fire, lightning, judgment, white man must go, blood must flow,' unquote. Attorney General Leslie Kundal tried to ban the Time magazine, that particular issue, but he was unable to prevent $1,000 subscription copies from reaching the island. They were very worried. Kundal was very worried that the story would exacerbate the hysteria that was swirling across Jamaica at the time. The Time article portrayed the Rastafari people as crazed savages, and I quote here, "They get hopped up on hashish and tom-tom music. They hold writhing, shouting services in their own versions of Coptic ancient Christian rites." What was feared by whites in Jamaica in particular, but unspoken in public, was the fear of, or the prospect of, a Mau Mau-like Rastafari attack on whites. I quote from the magazine again. "Reverend Henry began his armed buildup possibly with the help of Cuba's Fidel Castro. Police feared a massacre of whites. But as the cops came crashing through the hedges at Henry's headquarters, he made an abrupt switch to nonviolence. 'Peace and love, brothers,' Henry shouted to his followers as the cops dragged him off," unquote. So there's a lot going on in these stories, but they sort of demonstrate for us what's happening at that point in time. For one, you can see the caricatures, not only of Henry, but of the Rasta people as well, but also the exaggeration of the politics of the time. We have to also consider that revolutionary impulses are in the air, so to speak, at that time. Colonialism is being undone, and it's being undone also by Native people. There's a growing pride across the world in these non-aligned nations, pride in suppressed religious identities, racial identities, and ethnic identities. Now, let's come up to 1960. Reverend Henry wasn't finished. He had more. So after the repatriation scheme failed, it seemed that Reverend Henry decided that he and his followers would get to Africa, perhaps by force if necessary. Late 1959, Reverend Henry visited New York City. There he met with his son, Reynold Henry, and Reynold Henry had joined cause with a group in the United States known as the African National Pioneer Movement, the ANPM. Now the ANPM, how many people have ever heard of the ANPM? All right, good. It's an interesting movement at the time, right? So it's a pro-black organization. There's an offshoot of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. They were also, supportive of what we call today Black Pride. Interestingly, the founder of the ANPM, Carlos Cooks, was what I would call a raving atheist. So in some ways, if not many ways, the ANPM was a quite radical organization. Reverend Henry's son, Reynold, joined cause with the ANPM. However, one way or the other, the ANPM was not sufficiently radical for Reynold. And that could possibly be because Reynold was interested in an armed guerrilla movement to liberate Africa. And I think while the ANPM was pretty radical, I don't think that they were supportive of an armed guerrilla uprising, or at least participating in an uprising. So Reynold left the ANPM and he formed his own organization, the First Africa Corps. The First Africa Corps was formed in 1958. It was based in the Bronx in New York City, and it considered itself a revolutionary organization, and it targeted Jamaica as a platform for launching its effort to liberate Africa from colonialism. Several of the FAC members, First Africa Corps, called them FAC, were African Americans who were also soldiers, former soldiers, or veterans, right? So they were trained in warfare. These FAC members infiltrated Jamaica, and they had arms smuggled into Jamaica from New York City. Their plan involved training members of Reverend Henry's ARC, the African Reformed Church, Reverend Henry's church, for guerrilla warfare in Africa. Say it again? Okay. So we can debate the details of the training, and it's really interesting. Can't get into all the nuance here, but we can sort of look back on the training issue as both a farce and a tragedy. Nevertheless, the training activities were surveilled by the colonial authorities. Infighting occurred among the FAC members over tactics. You can ask questions about those tactics later. Nevertheless, to say that this infighting among the FAC led to the murder of 3 of the FAC members by Reynold Henry's henchmen. This spurred a national law enforcement search for the FAC subversives, which led to the killing of 2 Jamaican soldiers, I should say British Army soldiers, who ambushed the FAC, and out of the surprise, 2 soldiers were shot and killed. This in turn spurred a national manhunt for the 1st Africa Corps, which now the Jamaican press dubbed the Desperados. So this Jamaican national panic button was pushed in 1959, and pushed again and again and again between 1959 and 1962. The connection of the 1st Africa Corps to Reverend Henry's Africa Reformed Church, the ARC, led to a search of the ARC, and a search of the ARC turned up a cache of weapons, stone mortars, dynamite, some guns. Now, I don't think that those weapons were associated with the FAC weapons that were imported from New York, but nevertheless, these were weapons. They received widespread coverage in the press, and I think much more was made of the weapons than should have been, but nevertheless, it contributed to the fear and the paranoia of the time. What perhaps made the matter worse, what made worse, was the fact that they also discovered 2 letters written to Premier Fidel Castro in Cuba. The 2 letters, actually both of them in different ways, were requesting the support of Fidel Castro in overthrowing the government in Jamaica. Now, there's an argument about whether Reverend Henry actually knew what the content of those letters were, but nevertheless, the letters were confiscated and presented as evidence that Rastas were prepared to overthrow the government of Jamaica. Contributing to this shift in Rastafari's status was Jamaica's development of an internal intelligence apparatus. So Jamaica was beginning to develop its own national security state around the same time. Now, this emergent intelligence apparatus was unnerved by what it called, in its own internal records, black racism. Black racism was their term for black pride and black nationalism. So really what they were doing was that they were discovering that there were a number, or I should say a growing number of organizations in Jamaica that were concerned with black nationalism, black pride, but also revolutionary politics. And many of these organizations were also interested in building coalitions with Rasta people. And this emergent national security apparatus was surveilling this. They didn't understand it well, but what really troubled them was this sort of growth in the interest of black pride and black love. By the early 1960s, there were also troubling patterns of crime and gun violence in Jamaica, patterns that emerged in the 1960s, but that endure to this very present day. The Rastafari became a representation of the ills plaguing an impoverished island polity that was moving toward decolonization. They became a threat to national security. Being a threat to national security meant having no protection from violence, and the already stigmatized Rastafari was subject to violence at that point in time from the hands of citizens and law enforcement alike. So this condition of devalorization further contributed to that status, and in effect, Rasta people became disposable about that point in time, right? So by taking this point of view, we can better understand and appreciate events that followed, such as the Coral Gardens Massacre in 1963. If the Rasta people are disposable, we can make sense of that. During the 1960s, we can pay attention to what I would call the rising star of Rastafari people. And that rising star can be understood as an elder put it to me. An elder put it to me this way. She said there was white man time, That was the colonialism. There was brown man time. That was the brown men in Jamaica who became, run government and commerce, during the 20th century. Then there was black man time. But it's interesting that Rasta time actually came before black man time, and I would submit to you that Rasta time made black man time possible. So I'm going to close with you with a few thoughts about Rastafari in the 21st century. So the way I see it is that one way to think about Rasta people is growing in complexity and diversity with each generation. And that we should expect that and the challenges that come with the growth and evolution of a people over time. So what are the things, I'm not one who sort of believes in the future. I think we're always in the present, right? But what are some of the things to pay attention to in terms of the evolution of Rasta people? So one is the role of the internet, all right? The internet in the terms of connecting Rastafari people across the world to disseminate information about Rasta people, because that's one way, these vectors help people learn about Rasta people, but also the internet as a disseminator of disinformation. Two, growing routinization of Rastafari, along with continued discrimination. In other words, as the number of Rasta people across the world grows, people get kind of used to Rasta people, right? All right? I would also submit that Rastas are no longer the exemplars of black identity and culture that we were during Rasta time. There's also the growing influence of women Rastafari in the evolution of Rastafari. 4, the struggle over Rastafari likeness and who benefits from Rastafari likeness. And I'll sort of tell you this quickly. How many of you have seen the book, Yes, Rasta? All right, beautiful book, beautiful images of Rasta people all across the island of Jamaica. An appropriation artist named Richard Prince decided that he would take those same images and use them for his own purposes. In my view, he defiled those images. But he made millions of dollars off those images. And Rasta people got nothing from that. And so part of the struggle in the 21st century is control over Rastafari likeness and image, and I should say knowledge. There'll be continued gains in the recognition of cannabis as a sacrament. A few of us know about the recognition of cannabis as a sacrament in Antigua and Barbuda very recently. And I would submit that this has a lot more to do with the growing acceptance of cannabis the world over, rather than so much as the acceptance of cannabis as a sacrament or any religious sacrament, whether it's peyote or ayahuasca or whatever. Capitalism. Engagement with capitalism, and how will this play out over time, all right? Business schemes, cultural schemes, cooperatives, and so on. So I'll stop there, and I thank you for your time and your attention.
Let's give Dr. Price a round of applause. Thank you so much. All right, next we will have Dr. Barnett and his presentation. And his presentation is around St. Croix and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I will let him do the full introduction. Welcome to the stage, Dr. Barnett.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bowen. Greetings and welcome. It's a pleasure to be here in St. Croix, a place I haven't been to before, but I'm glad to be here because I hail from Jamaica, Jam Rock as some of us call it, and I consider St. Croix to be the sister reggae factory in the Caribbean. What do I mean by the sister reggae factory in the Caribbean? What I'm talking about, this is one of the powerhouses of roots reggae, and it's very, very interesting to see this phenomenon. So one of my missions, if you like, here in St. Croix is to get a feel of the island and see what it is that has given birth to so much talent and inspired reggae artists right here in this little rock them called St. Croix. I mean, I'm not going to leave out St. Thomas, but the concentration of roots reggae talent is right here in a St. Croix. The main concentration, and I'm going to expound on that. But what I can tell you in terms of the growth of Rastafari, and I give thanks to my esteemed colleague, Professor Charles Price, gave you a historical perspective on the trials, tribulation, and persecution Rastafari endured through the window of Claudius Henry, 1960. Yes, he paid the price for his revolutionary zeal. But nonetheless, what happened that Rastafari in the 60s in Jamaica infused Jamaican popular music with the lyrics and the message, right? If you listen to Scatterlights, that was ska, but tell you what, that was infused with reggae, Rastafari messages, right? And you have a whole heap of artists, but the notable thing is the record Oh Carolina, right? By the Folks Brothers. But it was Count Ozzy and Mystic Revelation upon percussion. So you have that Rastafari heartbeat. That's 1959, that one come out, you know. Yes, give thanks to Prince Buster, who produced it. He went up into the hills to find Count Ozzy and Mystic Revelation, right? Because he wanted something special on that record, Oh Carolina. So him bring that Rastafari percussive, we call it the Nyabingi drumming, that percussive element on Oh Carolina. And I hasten all your music buffs to go in your record collection, dig that one out, the original Oh Carolina, not the one that Shaggy reprised in 1993. May I talk about 1959, Oh Carolina, by Mystic Revelation and the Folks Brothers. So my thing is, me look on the historical trajectory of Jamaican popular music. So I'm saying that from the days of ska, Rastafari was there. Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, known as the Wailers back then, or the Wailing Wailers, were very involved with the development of ska music. They were there. They hadn't fully come into Rastafari consciousness at that time, but they were there. But 1966, when His Majesty visited Jamaica, was when we see that awakening of Rastafari consciousness far and wide. So even if you watch some documentaries on Bob Marley, you hear Rita Marley talking about seeing His Majesty in the entourage moving through the streets of Kingston, you know, how she sees the stigmata in his hand when he was waving. So she said, I saw it, the nail prints, and I knew then that His Majesty Haile Selassie was the second coming of Christ. So that was when she said she came into Rastafari. Peter Tosh notably sung the song, Rasta Shook Them Up, to herald that visit. So Peter Tosh penned that. So we see Rasta consciousness coming in with Peter Tosh. And I put it to you that when Bob flies back from the US, because unfortunately Bob had left Jamaica to work in the US during 1966. So he missed the visit of His Imperial Majesty to Jamaica in April 1966. But when Bob comes back, he also adopts Rastafari consciousness. And Mortimer Plano has a lot to do with that as well, because he took the young Wailers under his wing and brought them into Rastafari consciousness. So what we have was that the musicians of the 60s were being tutored and mentored by Rastafari elders such as Mortimer Plano, you know, and you had a whole heap of elders out there. Rasbona G's was just coming into his own, I would argue. The 60s, Nyabingi order is just coming into being. But Prince Emmanuel, notably, 1958, founds the EABIC, otherwise known as the Ethiopia Africa Black International Congress. And that house, otherwise known as Baba Shanti, is founded in 58. And interestingly enough, that's when Claudius Henry comes into Jamaica by invitation of Prince Emmanuel, as Baba Shanti would say, King Emmanuel. So Rastafari is relatively established in the 60s. And I'm saying all of that because in the 70s is the golden age of roots reggae music in Jamaica. The 70s. You have Burning Spear comes into the platform, into the arena. Culture, out of Joseph Hill and company. You know, Wailing Souls. You have so many artists to mention. Apart from the Wailers, obviously, Bob goes his separate way. Peter Tosh has his solo career. Bonnie Wailer, all producing conscious reggae music in their own right. I mean, Peter comes out with the Legalize It album in '76, followed by Equal Rights album in 1977, Bushman in 1978, and so forth. So in the 70s, it is pregnant with roots reggae music. And for me, it's the golden age of reggae. And I'm glad that I'm not any younger than I was, because I came of age in the 70s. I was going high school in the mid-70s, and I was going to Jamaica College. And I'll pick up one of my colleagues. We're not going to put him on the spot. We have another Jamaica College old boy in the audience. But when I go CSA now, I spend my lunch money. I never buy no lunch, you know. Downtown I go, Orange Street, and go buy a record. And I still have some of that vinyl today. So that's how I came into the music thing. And I was old enough to be buying Bob Marley as a vinyl come out, buying Peter Tosh as it come out. So that is where I'm coming from. That was the music that made me, that shaped me, that gave me that consciousness. And to me, it's the golden age, and I kind of just hoping that we really do have a strong reggae revival in Jamaica, because to me, it's getting watered down, to be honest with you. But I'm not going to say too much about that, because I would talk the whole day about what is happening in reggae. We have a few of the young artists that are holding up the flag. Chronics, Kabaka Pyramid, Protege, you know. So we have some of the young artists still singing conscious reggae music, but only a few of them. Yes, the dancehall of today, I'm sorry, the content is weak, very weak. The consciousness is just not there. So maybe we as the elders have to do more mentoring of the youth, but they're not thinking on the same revolutionary level as in the 70s. So I'm trying to figure out, why has that consciousness been watered down? Why them only think about, gun thing and why make our money fast and them kind of thing there. But as I said, I could speak wholly upon that. But the context of where I'm coming from is the music of the 70s was very conscious and rich. And it's in the 70s that Rastafari in Jamaica really start influencing the rest of the Caribbean. And we see Rastafari developing and growing in the other Caribbean islands. So in St. Croix, we have the emergence of conscious reggae music in the mid-70s. And I want to make note of Tony Rasazaya Thomas, who right now is on your local radio station. I meet him yesterday, and we are brethren still from long time, because when me there South Florida in the 90s, him there as well. So the other thing is, in South Florida, it's a nexus. So people in St. Croix, St. Thomas, they are South Florida, Jamaicans are there. So it's a mixing, so we get to interact and interface. It's really in South Florida. That's so we meet artists like Ras Attitude and Ras Batch and all of that stuff. So I became aware of this hotbed of reggae music from St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, when me there South Florida. So we give thanks for that. So Rasazaya, very still prominent, still well known in South Florida, and obviously well known. He was a reggae artist from the mid-70s. He did a song called People Struggling in 1975, seminal tune. I encourage everyone to go on YouTube and listen to that one. people struggling. See, so in the 70s, them talk about day-to-day struggling and hustling, just like a Jamaica thing, you know. Got people struggling in Jamaica as well. So it's a grassroots music. See, if you're rich and you're well-moneyed and all of that, you can't relate to struggling from day to day. Where you go buy your next piece of bread and, you know what I mean, you look for something to eat, lunchtime and all them things there. So you're coming, the music's coming from a grassroots level. And Rastafari know about day-to-day struggle. So it's not really a rich person thing and so forth. You have to be in touch with the grassroots, I would say, to really give that authentic root sound. But we'll talk more about that later. Then you had the band Creation coming out of St. Croix in the late 70s with man like Radio Upper Delhi, Herbert on keyboards, Tico Shakara, Camacho on percussion, Edgar Shalia Camacho as a vocalist, Charles Collins, Damien Towers on drums, Oscar Towers on the bass. So Creation Band was a conscious reggae band, late 70s, coming out of St. Croix. Then you have other bands like you have notably Kasha, the Kasha Heads, with Lionel Stewart as the band leader. You have the Creation Rebels with Hanif James, lead vocals, Marco Charles, founding member of that group, and he was the bassist. You had the Blacksmiths, you know. So all these groups coming out from the late 70s going into the early 80s. So St. Croix itself was experiencing a golden age of roots reggae, conscious reggae music. Yeah? So we're not talking about no funky music. Deep roots. So they managed to capture that essence of the music that was happening in Jamaica in the 70s as well. And that is why this presentation is actually captioned St. Croix as the twin, or rather the sister reggae factory of the Caribbean. Come and see it like a twin sister to Jamaica in many ways, at least in the 70s and the 80s, right? Now the irony is that St. Croix still has a strong roots reggae tradition, and we in Jamaica are struggling for hold on upon our roots reggae. And as a give thanks to Rebel Salute, right, which is one of the concerts that is primarily roots reggae orientated, and we can't take that for granted. And I'm one of the old guard that defend roots reggae music. So I am somebody involved with this publication, right? So not only am I a university lecturer, but I write and contribute to this magazine, Roots, what's it called? Roots Reggae and Culture, that we are defend. So we are doing our thing to try and preserve reggae music, right? The roots reggae music. And yes, I'm biased. I make no excuses for that. Some people want to deal with dancehall, fair enough. The thing is, old dancehall was conscious. You had consciousness in the old dancehall music. The problem is that nowadays dancehall is watered down. There's no message in there. What happened to the consciousness, you know, get up, stand up for your rights and all of that stuff seems to be lost on some of the young generation. Peter Tosh sing Fight Down Apartheid, right? Him sing, and all of the, by the way, it's Bob Marley and Peter Tosh that composed Get Up, Stand Up for Your Rights. Well, you know, that was duly composed by both Bob Marley and Peter Tosh. So my thing is, why do you them not gravitate into those kind of music in Jamaica? That's a discussion I want to have. Now, I haven't been in St. Croix long enough, but what I've been exposed to in terms of music, and I haven't even started to talk about Midnight, right? Vaughn Benjamin and Ron Benjamin founded the group Midnight, 1989. Now, what an impact that made. If nobody was paying attention to St. Croix, I have to say, when midnight comes to the public attention, that put St. Croix on the spotlight. We said something is going on in terms of roots reggae. And he has a very interesting style, a very interesting vocalizing style, but it works. But the reggae, the rhythm guitar, everything is authentic reggae. So you have that, and you have that heartbeat, the bass, which is a heartbeat. So the midnight and the other artists capture the essence, the fundamental essence of reggae. And the irony is that that they could be the ones who are preserving the tradition of roots reggae music. I'm very, very concerned about what's going on in Jamaica with the music, but you know, I can say I don't try not to belabor that point too much, but you will notice as I talk that I am concerned. I don't think it's in safe hands. Some of my colleagues say, oh, nothing wrong, it is. No, I don't feel that way at all. I think we're on a precipice. We have to bring that consciousness right back in there, and we can't have too much consciousness. That is what Rastafari is about. Let me tell you something. If it wasn't for reggae music, Rastafari wouldn't have spread globally. So we can't take that vehicle for a joke. We can't take it for granted. It's an important vehicle of reggae music. It's sacred. So I want them to respect that. Respect what the elders have built. And not just go all over the place and ting and ting and ting. Now hold on to your culture. African identity. That's something we talk about in the music. What Peter just said, African. No matter where you come from, so long as you're a black man, and he meant black women as well, you're an African. And that is the cornerstone of Rastafari ideology. So wherever I go in the world, I identify as an African. And when I go on the continent, I make it clear to my African brothers and sisters, you're talking to an African. Me, I'm no stranger. You can't call me a stranger upon the homeland. No. Can't happen, because me is a die-hearted Pan-African African. No matter where me there. Now I talk to my fellow Jamaicans, and even when I'm teaching my students and we talk about African identity, them say, boy, African, I don't think I'm African. I said, listen, we and you have to have a talk, a serious talk, in the classroom and outside. But so that's another thing, and it should be it shouldn't be a surprise. I teach African diaspora studies and so forth. So we're going to finish off. We're going to wrap up there, and we leave it open for question and answer. I didn't mention Desiree, who is a fantastic female artist coming out of St. Croix. We have Madam Nile in the audience here, by the way of Ras Attitude, who is here, and Sister Empress Tizzy is here as well. So I'm glad to see the St. Croix artists come out. So we're going to leave it there so we give the other panelists time to talk. My esteemed colleague, who will be introduced now by Dr. Bowen. Give thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, our final panelists, we have Jelani Naya. I even asked Dr. Price. I apologize. Come on up.
Yes, greetings, brothers and sisters. I want to greet you in the name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie and Empress Menen Asfa, and to give thanks to be here this morning to really share some very preliminary thoughts, but thoughts nonetheless that I've been working on for a few years, so to speak. My paper is entitled 2020 Vision Rastafari as Ethos. And the COVID-19 along with my colleague Michael Barnett's title for this panel, are bits of my inspiration for that 2020 vision. I'm using 2020 as metaphoric, perfect vision, but also the literal 2020, which we saw 3 years ago, and what that meant as far as lockdown and global occurrences. Thank you. Oh, I have to navigate this. Yeah, do you mind? I'll just tell you to flip. Yeah. And in thinking about the 2020 issues, one is somewhat forced to revisit Rastafari's wisdom about life and Babylon. And this is something that we literally experienced at the start of 2020 when the media took to finding Rastafari scholars and community to begin to explore what to expect when we went into our first episodes of local COVID-19 in Jamaica. There's a famous interview done by TVJ at the School of Vision, which is high in the Blue Mountains, run by someone called Priest Dermot Fagan. And in that interview, the reporter puts to him questions about what are we to expect. He suggested there would be 7 years of lean that we should be preparing ourselves for, and that this was an indication of things that we have long known would happen as Babylon must fall, but I and I particularly need to prepare ourselves for that. So the 2020 speaks to that time and what we experienced, but it also speaks to the fact that Rastafari has been a kind of perfect prophet of this pending doom of Babylon, but also one to have suggested alternatives to ensure that we survive Babylon. Rastafari's ethos speaks to perhaps more succinctly what is described as hashtag Black Lives Matter. And that is simplifying a conversation which I'm suggesting Black lives has always been central to Rastafari generally. I want to start, you can advance the, yeah. I want to start with the 60th anniversary of the Jamaican Independence Project last year, when the Jamaican state chose to honor the Rastafari founder, Leonard Howell. But they chose to honor him with the lowest honor possible, having previously awarded others like Bob Marley Order of Merit, which is ranking fairly high. I think I have that. They gave him an Order of Distinction in the Commander class. At the same time, they were upgrading the person responsible for the honor, the Honorable Minister, by awarding her an Order of Jamaica. Now, at this time, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, and Bob Marley have all been elevated to the merit category, which is as high as you can go as a regular citizen, unless you're a prime minister or national hero. But more importantly, Bob Marley has been increasingly contemplated as deserving of the honor of national hero. So the Jamaican state clearly didn't get it right in what they thought would have been honoring the root of Rastafari with a national honor, in recognizing the global impact of Rastafari and the enduring contribution. You can see somewhat illogic there. The Jamaican court had a ruling the previous year on dreadlocks for a young miss who had been barred, suggesting to the parents that junja and lice infestation were serious concerns, because of the wearing of dreadlocks. And we have had instances of public health officials trimming elders' beards, etc. So at this point, while the state is struggling to really indicate where it is at, where Rastafari recognition is concerned, we have some other things happening, including Rastafari being cited as an indigenous community and in line to be recognized as one of the intangible heritage within the global population in the same way that reggae has been recognized. I'm suggesting that, notwithstanding the state, can we advance? Rastafari has become a symbolic imperative for the Jamaican people, and not just the Jamaican people, but the diasporic African people. I like to reference Carl Boyce Davis's statement about Rastafari as an appropriate international African identity, especially when you are domiciled in countries, even if you're born there, they don't recognize you as really belonging there. United States, England, for black people, and Europe largely. And how Rastafari in this space becomes one of those Pan-African identities that often people seek to uphold. So Rastafari ethos, for me, is an attempt at theorizing the spirit of the now. And the hashtag Black Lives Matter kind of puts that in tension. And if we're going to go Greek, because it seems when we have serious problems, we pull on Greek capacity to explain, then we're talking about a kind of pathos within the regular society, very disturbing representation of Africa, and Rastafari being a counterpoint to that and providing a robust alternative cosmological point of view. Edmund Ennis makes this point in his book, Rastafari, From Outcast to Culture Bearer, but he doesn't quite invoke the ethos. I would say Ennis's work helps us to understand the transformation of the Jamaican society, and not just Jamaica, but the wider society, in as far as how it would have originally seen Rastafari, and how it had become evolving in seeing Rastafari as a legitimate custodian, a kind of exemplar African icon, a teacher of Africa, etc. And I would say that Kamau Brathwaite helps us also to get a sense of this in the way he references Rastafari. And I would say his work gives us a kind of genesis of this ethos that I'm seeking to describe. Wings of a Dove as one of those major poems where he's really grappling with becoming the voice that Rastafari is, while also representing Rastafari in a particularly outcast and perhaps undesirable way. So ethos for me looks at the spirit of a culture, and I'm suggesting that increasingly African diasporic cultures are indicating the information, the awakening, the sensitivity that Rastafari has provided. I am also mindful that Rex Nettleford, as early as 20 years ago, kept on reminding us that Arthur Lewis, at the time of the 1960 report, Lewis's takeaway was that we are all Rastafari, that Rastafari really was carrying a banner that many of us had put down and had forgotten. So in a sense, I think that this ethos has, some trajectory into the past. It's not anything that is necessarily only now emerging. Barry Chavans tells us that his work among urban youth in the 1980s, even if it was the bad man and the persons who seem not to have religio-political consciousness, when it came to time of participating in the chalice ritual, these individuals would invoke Rastafari incantations of worship in order to go into the chalice, so to speak, and suggesting that even the badman urban youth reflects this Rastafari symbolic and aesthetic ethos. You can advance, please. There's a famous viral video of this man. Many of you in the room might know him, a New Zealand parliamentarian who retired from Parliament some years ago. And it's interesting because his opening is very much contextualized within the ethos of Rastafari. He has a wonderful moment about 10 minutes on where fire burn the Queen and the New Zealand state for not dispensing with her earlier. And I'm looking at this conversation, and it becomes very current in the context of recent conversations about the Queen and how some people feel. We have had persons like Barbara Bush saying that she's a secret Rasta, and yeah, yeah, that was an interesting one. But really, coming from testimonies from her children about the kind of ethos musically and the spirit that she engendered within the household with selections from Bob Marley and other reggae icons. More recently, we have had Snoop Doggy Dogg, who did not have the journey that we would have hoped, but coming to Rastafari for a transformative induction and support, forming the kind of conversations and arrangements with the community intended to uplift and help to grow that space. So they're varying, not just Jamaican, but global sampling, for want of a better word, of the signifiers that would constitute Rastafari for us. I want to say even more increasingly, the Jamaican state has gone further, and the two conversations that help us to mark that are the conversations about ganja and the precedent set in Jamaica related to sacrament and the quantity of sacrament that might be affordable, but also the conversation about reparation, which the Jamaican state has also picked up. So in both instances, commissions were formed and public consultation, etc., engaged, but essentially suggesting what I might describe as growth and transformation of the state itself in recognizing the wisdom of what Rasta had always said about ganja, and also the pursuit of reparation as a discourse. I want to say that COVID-19 also, interestingly, resurrects the return conversation, as in whether it is back to Africa, all the predictions of doom as it surrounded how COVID would have, just undermined the inside of the African poor health system, ended up suggesting that Africa might have things that it could offer the world as far as methods of coping and just their traditional system of fighting disease that is well embedded. But the Africa that the Caribbean could represent became more important, as during that period, persons shored up their interest in returning to warm spaces with sea and sun and bush medicine and a range of things that might be so inspiring. So I think that there has been a kind of reawakening of the Rastafari intentionality over the last 3 years more so, but really ongoing, in an ongoing way, where persons have been using Rastafari as a counterpoint for various kinds of distress that they might be experiencing with the system, and using the succinct but comprehensive conversations like Babylon as expressive intent. I want to end, since I'm told I'm out of time, with, I'm not sure if maybe I can hook up my computer. May I still be, am I able to hook up? I want to share a video which some of you might not know, which I think is critical to just sealing up my conversation. And this is linking all of what I said about popular culture, youth culture, badman culture, and Rastafari as a symbolic expression of such. Yeah, thanks. And this speaks to a youth who found himself in a kind of hot water because of a song that was named Man I Live Like Rasta. The song is by artist Valiant. And some people thought that Rastafari had been, well, let's look at it and see if the sound, oh, I think.
Man, I live like Rasta. No beef, no pasta. Here force white dogs, snap that fuck them gal don't need Viagra. Look how me looking at my Gucci. How I kinda mood this. Uptown girl drink come smoothie. So she know me a dog, me a Cupid. Get the cup, I'ma get a leash and more rum. Booze. Chain bust down. Nice dog, me never yet drunk. But a girl full of eyes with her tongue. Hey, who that a steer by me? Alone send stinky dear by me. I hype and a pose with broke Barbie. Still a chopping line, so enough charges. Man, I live like Rasta. No beef, no pasta. No. Here force white dogs, snap that fuck them gal don't need Viagra. Look how I'm looking at me.
All right, thank you very much. I think you get the point I'm making. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Naya. At this time, I'd like to bring Dr. Price, Dr. Barnett, and Dr. Naya up to the stage here. It's not really a stage, but up here, if you all will take a seat at this time, we will take questions and from the audience. If you have a question, raise your hand and I will pass you the mic. Come on up, Dr. Price. Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to thank all the speakers, but I particularly was in the room for Michael Barnett and Dr. Naya. So to the other speaker, praise and honor. There wasn't much mention about women. There were a few here in St. Croix, but we'd like to hear more of the names of women who are conscious, contributing to the continuing work of the sacredness of Rastafari, and also to let you know, because you're looking for other events that are extolled in Rastafari, and one of them is the Ital Food Fest. A couple in the UK is now producing July 15th, the biggest festival that is supporting plant-based food, but they're incorporating music, which is an essential part of the sacredness of Rastafari and giving credit to the ITAL community, Rastafari. Thank you, Dr. Jelani Naya, for going to the ethics and all of that. But just a brief mention of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just mention Sister Sharon, that I didn't mention Desiree, who is a prominent female artist coming out of St. Croix. We have Mother Nile as well. She's just left. She'll probably come back into the room. But there are a few, and I mean, I know there's this tension between how many female artists get the promotion they need to in the reggae industry. But there's so many talented females out there that no matter what obstacles they face, they will rise. And we have written an article on Desiree in the copy of the magazine, which I'll grab a bit later on. And Dr. Bowen, could you pass that ideas thing and that? Yeah, both of them, yes. So just to let the public know, you see, Desiree is on the front cover of this magazine. This is a special Reggae Queens edition of Roots Reggae. Can we make a point? We're not leaving the women out. So we have this magazine, Roots, and let me just tell you, it's readily available in Jamaica. We're going to have to try and get some distributed here in the Virgin Islands. Yes, coming in St. Croix, I see there's a gap. So this is a publication I'm very much attached to. I am the Jamaica representative. It's actually produced out of South Florida, or the Kingston, what we call Kingston 21, Fort Lauderdale. But I make sure I'm a part of this because it's in line with my outlook on the industry. The other thing, very quickly, I want to say, we have this publication, Ideas. This is where the 2020 vision perspective emerged from, because all three of us have contributed to this anthology, a 2020 vision perspective on the Rastafari movement, and that's what inspired this panel. So in the year 2020, we had our heads down writing vigorously about the state of Rastafari as we saw it then. And I only have a few copies here, but there's a few I make available to sale, just 20 US for one of these copies. But I want, some exposure out here in St. Croix. And obviously, I'm biased, but I'll say these articles are groundbreaking in terms of, modern day perspective on the Rastafari movement, giving it the 2020 vision perspective, literally, because we were writing June 2020. When we were on lockdown, we said, let's use our time wisely. See? So just a quick plug there. Any other questions, perspectives? Hopefully we'll have time. I wanted to play one tune from Ras Attitude and so forth, but I kind of probably went a little off track. But yes, Ras Attitude as a question.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Greetings, kings. Give thanks for the item forwarding to the island. Give thanks for the meditation and the vibration that the item bring. My question to the eye is, as far as Jamaica and the Virgin Islands, what is in speakings right now or talkings right now as far as Virgin Island artists coming to Jamaica, as far as, let's say, Rebel Salute, or doing a showcase of Virgin Island artists in Jamaica, as well as, because Jamaican artists always comes here. We bring them here all the time, whether via promotion. My brethren Norrisman was just here recently, and holding a vibe. So I want to know, as an artist here on the Virgin Islands, is there any talkings of Virgin Island artists coming to Jamaica, as far as promotion, people in Jamaica bringing artists from here?
Well, let me take that one first, Ras Attitude, because a conversation I had briefly mentioned to you earlier. But as one of the persons here, I know I actually have one foot in the music industry, and I might be chastised for it, but we're human beings and we can multitask. So although I'm an academic, I still know quite a few musicians, and it is an art form that is very powerful and very necessary. And I'm doing my part as what I call the preservation of reggae music. I see it as a mission. So artists like you, I've listened, you know, we met in South Florida, obviously 20 years ago. As I said, I'd make it a point to try and have you come in and perform and put on a show with, you know, I have a couple of other partners in the industry. But, you know, if we come together, it can happen. I see that gap, you know what I mean? And that's the thing. I said, well, I'm coming to St. Croix, just Jah works. Because, yeah, man, because, as I said, I met you in South Florida, but you've never been to Jamaica. Noah's Rasbach and Noah's Desiree, to my knowledge. So there's so much talent here, but I'm seeing it from afar. And Jamaica needs to be exposed to it. You know what I mean? So they will have more of appreciation for what they have given birth to. Because I think we are taking our music for granted now. You see the video that Jelani just put on, the Valiant? Let me give my honest commentary. It's a mimicry of Rastafari. It shows you how this thing couldn't have played in the 70s. You know what I mean? A man there would be, a man there would have to watch them head back. This, no, I'm serious. That's how serious we were there. Them thing couldn't work in the 70s. Not anywhere, you know, but Rasta need pastor and all of that. There's a watering down of the movement. Me, very radical that way. Me not take them thing there for joke. See? Yes.
Is on? Don't have a question. Just have a blessed statement for each and every one of us in here. In a this Gideon war, lace up me boots, ready fi go fight for the truth. In a this Gideon war, rise and not fall, ready fi go trample them all. That's a message for real. When they don't respect Rasta. And I know time is up, but that's a message for that song and for a lot of infiltrators. Because as me, as an empress, I wasn't born into Rasta. When I wanted to become a Rasta, I was 14 years old, and my mom simply sat me down and said, darling, I am not telling you you cannot be a Rasta, but because Rasta is not looked at as what they truly are, find yourself, foot yourself, and when you accomplish what you want as a young lady, you're natty up. And that's what I did. So it's a Gideon war against the Rastafari, and Mother and I would like to say, we all need to work collectively for us to push forward. So that's my message, because I know time is short. Blessed love. And it's an honor to hear from each and every one of you.
Yes.
You know, it's a pleasure. He called me and I didn't know I was sitting next to him when I was eating. So blessed love to each and every one of you. And I would love to have a whole platform in Jamaica, because I just recently got my own promoter's license for the mere fact the struggle as we as conscious reggae artists here within the Virgin Islands. I'm not going to say St. Croix alone, because we are three people, three of them. So within the VI, we the conscious artists, whether it be male, whether it be man or a woman, we do have a fight, because the conscious, like you say, is getting, you know, subliminally washed away, and then they bring it back in a different tone and try to say it's reggae music. Nah. So Gideon War, let me put on our boots, lace them up, and do what we got to do. You can find that on Spotify. Blessed love.
Good, thanks. All right, so Prof. Meeks.
We're going to have to hold on questions. This is just the start of a conversation. Please continue your questions.
Can we just squeeze him in, like 1 minute, literally?
So we can take his question after we close the live feed, but first we have three more things. First off, let's give a round of applause to Dr. Naya, Dr. Price, and Dr. Barnett for their presentations. Next, I'm going to hand the mic over for a quick announcement, and then we're going to close. Dr. Barnett has one last musical tune.
Greetings. I just needed to make sure that I identify that who has joined us and has been here during this particular session is the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences here at the University of the Virgin Islands. I just want to welcome Dr. Kimmery Ingerman. I need you to come for a second, Dr. Ingerman. During my tenure here at the University of the Virgin Islands, Dean Ingerman was really instrumental for the CSA being able to have this journal. I know you want to do that, but I need the journal, please, Dr. Laureano, because we want to make sure we don't take away from this piece. I keep telling persons, I know $50 seems like a lot, but to print this, it cost us $45. Just because we wanted persons to have a copy in their hands. Yes, it will be available online, and yes, you can download it in Kindle shortly. But the intention was to have it published in the Caribbean by the University of the West Indies Press. We're very pleased by that. And this woman right here was instrumental to helping me to be able to do this. So I wanted to give you a complimentary copy to you. Thank you very much. Right? I know you, and this gentleman here, Laureano. Okay. No, you're going to get your extra minute. All right. Are you ready? And now we're offering this as a gift, as a token of our appreciation to the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, to Dean Kimmery Ingerman. Thank you. With that being said, this has been a fantastic panel. I think next time we need to add like the concert portion so we can like hear all the live music, whatever. But I want to return this to the chair, and then I know that Dr. Barnett wants to get that other minute. Use your minute.
All right, so in closing, Dr. Barnett would like to share a piece, and I'll cue it up for you while you introduce it.
But it's actually, could you go further up? We're going to go with the RAS attitude to the next email. Go to the inbox and go up, yeah. Do you see RAS attitude there? All right, that's the one we're going to play. Yeah, so we give thanks. Oh, Prof. Meeks left. All right. So this is, no, not the one, the other. I wanted the video track. Yeah, sorry. And it says, go further up to culture. You should see, yeah, there you go, yeah. All right, so we're gonna just play a video of RAS Attitude, Ethiopian Eyes, which is a nice one. We can just open up the screen as well. Yeah. Just open. Yeah, that one. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yes, we give thanks. As I said, it's available for sale out the front now.
Hold my copy.